We already knew Jayden Daniels was athletically gifted. His professionalism has impressed even the most veteran of his teammates. But we also learned so far in training camp that he is cool and calm under pressure now that he can actually face a little bit of it. That and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, credential member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. And I'm here with you every Monday through Friday. Greatly appreciate you coming through for today's episode. Every dayers greatly appreciate you coming through every single day. Welcome back to your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. And of course, if you haven't already, you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode. On today's episode, the Washington Commanders took the day off of practice. We got the day off of practice. And even though my schedule was that if there's practice, we do an episode. If there's not, we probably won't do one. We're going to do an episode anyway, because I think it's a really good time. We're 1 week and 1 day into Washington Commanders training camp. Let's take a look back real quick in the early part of training camp, find out what we've learned, what we've confirmed, and what we still want to know as we move forward beginning on Thursday with the second day of week 2. And we're going to start off with what we've learned, including that Jayden Daniels has another layer to an already impressive NFL resume, and that is that he is pretty cool and collected under pressure, granted training camp pressure. If you want to discuss that or anything else Washington Commanders related, all you got to do is shoot me a text message, and you can do that by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. From there, you can text me. I will text you. You can ask me your questions. I will send you bonus information, bonus content, exclusive invites to our insider-only Zoom conferences, which we have one on Wednesday night, and a whole lot of other things. The greatest part about it is no hashtags, no apps, no filters, literally just your cell phone, my cell phone, and we make this thing happen. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL, and you will get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Anybody who paid attention during the pre-draft process already knew that Jayden Daniels, incredibly athletically gifted, the deep ball on point. His ability as a runner, electric. Heisman Trophy winner for a reason. One of the most dominant quarterbacks in college football. And it all led to him being the number 2 overall draft pick in April of the Washington Commanders. Now, since he's been drafted, we got to do some press conferences with him, got to see rookie camp, OTAs, mandatory minicamp, and we learned then he's also the consummate professional, right? One of the first dudes, if not the first dude in the building, earning the respect of people like Jonathan Allen, Terry McLaurin. Bobby Wagner had a lot of nice things to say about him. The coaching staff can't stop ranting about just how he conducts himself, how he's prepared for every practice, for every meeting, for every film study session. Terry McLaurin talking about how he does extra work on the side, all of those things. So coming into training camp, we already knew those things. They're all great things, and those are things you absolutely want in your rookie quarterback as you try to rebuild a franchise. But what we've learned since he's been here is that he's also very cool and calm and collected under pressure. Watching practice just on Tuesday, I actually made a joke to another beat reporter out there at the practice field that if Jayden Daniels' house was on fire, which knock on wood that it never is, but if Jayden Daniels' house was on fire, he probably wouldn't run out of the house. He'd probably walk out of the house, right? And that's just a tongue-in-cheek way of describing just how cool and collected Jayden Daniels really is. Now, it doesn't mean that we haven't seen him make some back foot throws and all these other things. But when the guys like Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, pads, no pads, when these big behemoths of human beings are bearing down on him, he does not panic. And I think that's the most important thing that you can look for from a rookie quarterback. Now, granted, he knows he can't be hit. The practices don't count in the win-loss column, and pressure is cumulative, right? So obviously you don't want to see him continue to be under pressure. And I'm not even going to go as far as to say like this dude will just never crack under any kind of pressure, because I think that's unfair. It's putting superhuman attributes on a person who is obviously very much a human. So I don't want to go that far. But what's really been very impressive is not only does he, when he sees pressure coming, get away from it, but he gets away from it in a way that is not hectic. And I think that's the best way I can explain it. You watch quarterbacks all the time across the National Football League get away from pressure, sure, but a lot of times they do it and their legs are running a mile a minute. Their arms are pump this way. Their eyes are darting left and right all over the field, wide-eyed. Their head is just moving every which way it possibly can before they finally make a decision to throw it away, throw to a receiver, or try to get as many yards as they can using their legs. With Jayden Daniels, however, when he's getting away from pressure, it looks like it's just another day on the block. It's nothing new. It's nothing special. It's nothing to freak out about. Jayden Daniels is kind of out there, long stride and looking smooth, running faster than he appears. He definitely appears to be moving slower than he is. Head is downfield, stature is tall, and when he delivers the ball, it's usually on target. It's usually where he wants to put it, and it's where his receiver can make a play. And very rarely do defenders have the opportunity to make those plays. It's really something that you kind of see out of guys like Patrick Mahomes, out of guys like Lamar Jackson. Whereas other quarterbacks, like I said, I don't want to go through a list of like naming names, but you know what I'm talking about. You see quarterbacks sometimes evading pressure, and they basically look like they're a rabbit being chased in the hunt. Whereas Jayden Daniels looks like he's the guy who's in charge of this hunt versus the guy being hunted by the defense. And it's been really cool to see. And I think it's something that looking forward to the joint practices against the New York Jets, looking forward to the preseason, if and when he gets preseason action. It's something that you want to see when he can be hit. Now, he can be hit in the joint practices, but when he gets to a game environment, again, pressure is cumulative. Is that something that continues? Obviously, that's something that we want to continue to watch, but what we've seen so far in practice has been very impressive on that front, and just another way that Jayden is kind of endearing himself to the people around the organization. Another thing that we learned going away from the quarterback position, but staying on the offense, Jeremy McNichols is the leading back for the running back 3 competition at this point. Right now, it looks like about a 2-back race for that third running back spot. And don't get me wrong, it's not going to be, Brian Robinson's obviously going to be the main guy. Austin Eckler is going to have his role. That RB3 job can become very important very quickly. It can be important on special teams, can be important in certain role-playing situations. But one guy goes down, again, knock on wood, it doesn't happen. One guy goes down, and that RB3 suddenly becomes RB2. So this is a very important decision for the Washington Commanders to make. And watching these guys go through the team drills, it's just pretty evident right now that Jeremy McNichols simply can just do a little bit more than Chris Rodriguez is doing right now. Now, I still believe that Chris Rodriguez has more in him than what we have seen or what we've been able to see. But the problem is you got to put it on tape. And when the opportunities do come, you got to be able to capitalize on those things. And Chris Rodriguez just hasn't had the ability to capitalize on some of those opportunities. Meanwhile, we've seen Jeremy McNichols catching touchdown passes out of the backfield. We've seen him making nice cuts to get through holes in the offensive line. We've seen him just kind of making plays on a consistent basis. Not the star of camp by any means or anything like that, but certainly making a good amount of noise. He's got a history with Anthony Lynn, the run game coordinator over on the offense from their time in San Francisco together. So, and Jeremy McNichols simply has just been around the block for a while, been in the NFL for a minute. So he's got a lot of veteran knowledge there. So Jeremy McNichols coming out as the RB3, something that we didn't necessarily know. We knew the competition was going to be there, wondering who was going to be the back that emerged. So far, Jeremy McNichols is that guy. Speaking of third positions that could be very important, the third off-ball linebacker in the Washington Commanders defense seriously could be very important. Now, most of the time, defenses are in sub packages, right? You're in your nickel or whatever. I think the base package for the Washington Commanders, you would consider it a 4-3, 4-down linemen, 3 linebackers. Personally, I kind of like the 3-4 type of look, but you're going to see this defense in a lot of 1, 2, 3 down linemen scenarios. Those are your sub packages. But when they do put 3 off-ball linebackers on the field at the same time, rookie out of Temple, Jordan McGee has been that third linebacker to join Bobby Wagner, to join Frankie Louvu. Hasn't been Anthony Pittman, hasn't been Jamin Davis, hasn't been anything else but Jordan McGee. So Jordan McGee, we've learned in this first week and a day, that linebacker, that off-ball linebacker 3 for right now. We'll see how it continues to go. We'll see how he continues to do. But right now, he's doing a very good job. He's around the ball. He's making plays. He's being where he's supposed to be. And again, everybody you talk to has a lot of good things to say about him coming out of these training camp practices. I do plan on speaking to him. We've got practice again Thursday and Friday. So I do plan on speaking to him before the weekend. So hopefully we'll get him on the show here pretty soon. So those are the 3 things that we've learned so far in the first week and a day of Washington Commanders training camp. Jayden Daniels looking cool under fire. Jeremy McNichols looking in firm control of that RB3 race between he and Chris Rodriguez Jr. and Jordan McGee looking like the linebacker 3 on the Washington Commanders depth chart. Coming up next, what have we confirmed? What are things that we already kind of knew that we just got more information and maybe have solidified some opinions on, including Emmanuel Forbes potentially being a first-team cornerback in his second year in the National Football League. That and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by Game Time. And Game Time is an authorized marketplace or ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting baseball tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. They've got killer last-minute deals that save you up to 60% on the app, all-in prices. So when you go to hit checkout, there's no hidden fees that suddenly pop up to try to gouge you for more money. The views from your seat make sure that even if you've never been to the ballpark before, you know the value of the seat that you're getting and the view that you're going to get when you get there. And of course, their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. Friday, August 2nd, you can see the Washington Nationals hosting the Milwaukee Brewers for as little as $5. Take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I kind of floated the idea out there before training camp started that Emmanuel Forbes may be more of a starting cornerback competitor than maybe people have realized. We have confirmed that through what we've seen in training camp so far. I'll tell you why coming up next on this episode of Locked On Commanders. Thanks again for making this your first listen of the day every day. Just make sure you come back tomorrow. We do have practice on Thursday, so we will be back out in Ashburn. We'll have more to talk about coming from that. In the meantime, if you need more sports coverage, check out Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories around sports. You get your can't miss analysis, opinions, news, all streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So talking about Emmanuel Forbes, right? Michael Davis was signed from the Los Angeles Chargers as a free agent this offseason. And basically from that point forward, everybody, including myself, basically said Emmanuel Forbes is probably done. He's probably done being a starter for the Washington Commanders, which means he's probably done being a starter for the duration of his rookie contract, unless he gets traded like a guy like the Detroit Lions traded Jeff Okudah, who they drafted in the first round out of Ohio State all those years ago, ended up trading him to the Atlanta Falcons for a 5th-round pick, I think about 3 years into his contract, his rookie deal. So maybe Jayden or Emmanuel Forbes could end up in that kind of same wheelhouse. But then the more we really kind of studied the history of the Dallas Cowboys defense, the more we studied about where Joe Witt came from, the more we studied Emmanuel Forbes as a prospect, because I think also most of us pretty much agree that the coaching that Emmanuel Forbes and his teammates got last year, not good enough, right? So if you give him that grain of salt and you study what his capabilities are, you study what this defense likes to do, it kind of started to unfold that we're like, hey, maybe Emmanuel Forbes is actually going to have a chance to get better in this system. And if he can get better, maybe he can actually hold on to one of those starting jobs, with most of us assuming or presuming that Benjamin St-Juste is probably going to be one of those starting cornerbacks. And basically, Emmanuel Forbes and Michael Davis are duking it out for that second starting cornerback job. Well, coming into training camp, and granted, some people did not agree with that assessment, and that's perfectly fine. But coming into training camp, that's kind of the mindset that we had here, was maybe Emmanuel Forbes can be the number one corner. We'll just have to see how he does with his split in snaps. But here's the thing. He really hasn't had to split snaps. Emmanuel Forbes has been almost exclusively a first-team cornerback opposite of Benjamin St-Juste. Now, Dan Quinn still says there's competition everywhere. In fact, he was actually asked recently about cornerbacks and all that stuff, and he mentioned Benjamin St-Juste, Emmanuel Forbes, Michael Davis. We'll figure out how it is. But right now, when you look at the field, it's Benjamin St-Juste, it's Emmanuel Forbes 85 to 90% of the time. There have been some first-team reps for Michael Davis. Sometimes he's done it without Emmanuel Forbes on the field. On Tuesday, Benjamin St-Juste wasn't on the field. It was Michael Davis on the field opposite Emmanuel Forbes. So still, Emmanuel Forbes out there with the first team. Now, the question there is, was Benjamin getting some rest? Did he injure himself a little bit, right? We go back to practice on Thursday. I feel like somebody's probably going to ask Dan Quinn that question in the morning. There's also the reported signing, because it hasn't been officially made official. He's not by the time of this recording anyway, that the Washington Commanders are bringing back wide receiver Byron Pringle. If they're bringing out Byron Pringle, then the math typically says they got to let somebody go, or they got to put somebody on IR. Knock on wood that Benjamin St-Juste didn't do something that's going to land him on IR. Hopefully that's not the case here, but you get what I'm saying. Bottom line is, even when Michael Davis was getting the majority of his first team reps, which was on Tuesday, it wasn't with Emmanuel Forbes off the field. It was with Benjamin St-Juste on the field. And again, I still don't believe that Benjamin St-Juste necessarily, his job is the one that's up in the air. So while it was a little bit of a bolder statement, I mean, this is a second-year cornerback who was a first-round draft pick. So typically saying a second-year first-round draft pick could be a starter is not the boldest of statements, right? But because of it is Emmanuel Forbes, because there is kind of this hot and cold surroundings of him, then that's what kind of made it a little bit more of a hotter take than it should have been. But Emmanuel Forbes so far, and this coach staff so far, showing us that Emmanuel Forbes is getting the opportunity to earn a first-team cornerback spot. So if he doesn't get it, it's not going to be because of lack of opportunity. Speaking of opportunities, Quan Martin came in last year along with Emmanuel Forbes, and everybody kind of said he's a tweener. He could be a nickel, he could be a safety, he could be both depending on what you need. Last year, he started off mostly as a nickel. Towards the end of the season, moved back as a safety, and everybody said, hey, the dude kind of looks better as a safety than he does as a nickel. And I go back to my draft evaluation of Quan Martin, and even at Illinois, he looked better coming from the top down, even when it was in run support, coming from the top down than he did at the nickel position. Although in Illinois, he looked pretty solid, in both areas. This offseason, OTAs, mandatory minicamp, we saw Quan working mostly as a free safety. Talking to him, he said, yeah, mostly I'm at a free safety position. So we'll kind of see what happens. In training camp, he's a free safety, guys. And I even said it on a recent episode, said, you know what? I'm just going to start calling him a safety. I'm done calling Quan Martin a defensive back because that's what we call guys. They can be safeties, they can be nickels, or they can be corners, whatever. They can kind of play everywhere. I'm not saying that Quan can't play everywhere, right? He can certainly play in the box. He can certainly play the slot, and he can certainly play deep safety. But I think what this team is doing is they're making him a safety right now. It's Mike Sanderson, the rookie out of Michigan, getting the nickel corner first team reps. It's Noah Igbenogany getting the second rep. So I think that's kind of how they want to do this. Now, if Mike Sanderson were to go out to an injury, knock on wood, it doesn't happen, I do think Quan Martin probably then falls into the nickel role. Percy Butler fills into the safety role because that's something else that we've learned that we didn't hit on in the first second is that Percy is actually the third safety in coverage. Defoe is actually looking like the fourth, which is interesting. I hope I don't know if the EA Sports Madden adjusters are looking at that because they've got Defoe as the number one rated safety, yet he's the fourth guy on the field right now. Quan Martin, I think, again, is you can call him the backup, you can call him whatever you want, but I think if Mike Sanderson, again, knock on wood, it doesn't happen, but say he goes out to an injury, Quan Martin drops down in the slot, Percy Butler is the safety back there with Jeremy Chin. I just think that's how this is going to go. But bottom line is right now, if the Washington Commanders have it their way, Quan Martin is a safety. So you're going to hear from me, I'm probably going to be calling Quan Martin a safety until we show up Thursday and Quan Martin is getting slot reps. Jokes on me. Something else that we confirmed, Nick Allegretti, left guard number one. Michael Dieter has gotten some opportunities to be the left guard number one in some reps, mostly because I think they want Nick Allegretti to get second and third team center snaps because they're trying to cross-train, make sure guys can do a little bit of everything. And most offensive line coaches will tell you that you need to be able to know how to snap if you're going to play on the offensive line. But when Dan Quinn was asked recently about, hey, is it fair for us and out here to kind of look at Sam Cosmi and Tyler Biadasz to say those guys are basically solidified, everything else is kind of up in the air, Dan said, yes, that is pretty much fair. He also might throw Nick into that conversation as well. And again, outside of the days where they wanted to get Nick Allegretti some backup center snaps, Nick Allegretti has been the first team left guard. So I think Nick Allegretti pretty much solidified as your first team left guard. And so at this point, I'm confident in saying that in the first week in a day, and again, I think what's really important, I was on the radio, 106.7 The Fan with Linnell Willingham on Wednesday or Tuesday night, and we're talking about Mike Sanderson, right? How impressive he's been and how good he can be and how he looks. And I said it on there too, talking in the context of 1 week, 1 day into training camp, here's how I'm comfortable talking about it. Well, 1 week, 1 day into training camp, I'm comfortable saying that we've confirmed Nick Allegretti is the starting left guard. And we have another day off after the second week is done before the New York Jets joint practice. Maybe we'll come back through and see if we still have that confirmed because certainly things can change on a dime. We will have to see what unvelops. We'll also have to see what develops with the right tackle and left tackle positions. That and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. Never want them to stop. But when the NBA playoffs are gone, the NHL playoffs are gone, NFL season isn't back yet, Major League Baseball isn't in the heat of the pennant race, sports simply just stop sportsing as much as we want them to because there's fewer games around. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I got to do is open up the app, dream up any bet I want anytime, and I am back in the action. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus every single day. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Go on to FanDuel Sportsbook. You might see new customers getting offers for $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet, or you might see Dinger Tuesdays on Tuesdays, obviously, where you bet on a Major League Baseball game and you get bonus bets for every home run across the league on that day. So plenty of things to do this summer, plenty of ways to get into the action. So head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders, we've talked about what we learned in training camp so far, 1 week and a day into it. We talked about what we have confirmed. Now let's talk about what we still need to look out for and confirm or learn about as we continue training camp. Week 2, day number 2 on Thursday. And we got to start at the offensive line, right tackle, left tackle. I'm not going to be honest. I'm going to be honest. And every day, as you already know this, I pretty much had Andrew Wiley penciled in as the starting right tackle. However, given what Dan Quinn said, right? He said, can we pencil in Sam Cosmi and Tyler Biadasz? He said, yeah, you can do that. You can also probably pencil in Nick Allegretti. Didn't say we can pencil in Andrew Wiley. Now, maybe he's just not remembering to mention it, whatever. For what it's worth, outside of Andrew Wiley saying he had some body tightness, which some people, I guess, assume it had to do with the lower legs. He's basically been in there as the first team right tackle every rep, while outside of when he was dealing with that. Now, when he's not dealing with that, it's been Cornelius Lucas as the first team right tackle. Brandon Coleman got a little bit of first team right tackle work as well. The left tackle position, though, firmly Brandon Coleman or Cornelius Lucas. The battle kind of goes back and forth. Cornelius Lucas got the majority of the first team left tackle reps to start camp. Brandon Coleman has been getting the majority of the first team left tackle reps lately in camp. I don't think I would say that either of them, like I had a commenter on YouTube say, well, Brandon Coleman got the first team left tackle snaps in pads, so he's obviously the starter. Well, that's one day in pads, and I would not go that far yet. So could it happen? Absolutely. Could still happen. To be honest with you, if it's me, if I'm the Washington Commanders, if Brandon Coleman, if you're talking 10 scale, Cornelius Lucas is a 7 on a 10 scale as a left tackle, and Brandon Coleman is a 6.0 or better, I'm putting Brandon Coleman in there because Cornelius Lucas is a 7 right now. Brandon Coleman is a 6 right now. Experience, game time situation, game management, further coaching should turn him into about a 7.5 by the first quarter or so of the NFL season from the way that I see it, right? So that's just kind of where I'm. So if the race is close, I'm probably giving it to Brandon Coleman, but the race is not over yet. So we'll continue to watch that position battle as we get through this second week and then into next week with the joint practice against the New York Jets. Honestly, this time next week, we're going to be talking about joint practice against the New York Jets. That's how quickly this thing is coming. What else we need to see? Jamin Davis. There are some people who think that Jamin Davis is going to be cut. There's people who think Jamin Davis might be traded. There's people who think Jamin Davis is going to be the next Michael Parsons. Here's what I would tell you. Jamin Davis is working his butt off to make this edge conversion work. Jamin Davis is not really getting any linebacker reps in training camp. He's pretty much only getting edge reps. And even when he's getting those, they're basically 3rd/4th team reps. So that's kind of the status of Jamin Davis right now. If Jamin can go out there and do enough to draw the attention of another NFL team to get traded, I think the Washington Commanders might actually flip him and maybe try to get a 5th or a 6th rounder out of somebody for him, or even, a 7th rounder. I don't know, because while you look at the Dallas Cowboys and say, well, they need their Micah Parsons, you can potentially say that this team has a lot of pass rushers. Cleveland Farrell has looked like more of a pass rusher than I gave him credit for leading up to this point in his career. Dorrance Armstrong is a fairly known commodity, not as a starter, but coming from as a role player with the Dallas Cowboys. Dante Fowler has looked explosive. Okay, we're just going to put it that way. So this team has got some pass rushers. They don't necessarily need to stockpile 4 or 5 other pass rushers. KJ Henry looks quick. Andre Jones Jr. is flash here and there. Like, they've got some dudes. So if Jamin Davis can do enough at the Jets joint practice, do enough in the Jets preseason game, heck, maybe the Jets call up and say, hey, dude, leave Jamin behind. Leave Jamin back here in New Jersey, and we'll take care of him. That's just kind of a vibe I get. There's no inside information there. There's no source inside the team telling me that. I just kind of have this feeling that if Jamin does enough to draw the attention of another team, maybe they'd be willing to deal Jamin. We will see what happens there, but we need to see more out of Jamin. And I think anybody saying that Jamin Davis isn't going to work as an edge, won't work as an edge, doesn't work as an edge, is putting the cart before the horse. It's way too early to say whether or not Jamin can or will become good at this role the longer that he stays here. So that's just my personal opinion. So I'm going to continue to watch it and see how it develops. Another thing we're going to watch develop, the wide receiver depth battle. Right now, guys, I think this is about a one-job situation. I think your wide receiver depth chart is going to look like Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Luke McCaffrey, Jamison Crowder, who looks like pretty much your only legitimate punt returner / kick returner, although Mike Sanders still certainly threatening there. But even if Mike Sanders still threatens there, don't you want to? You'd probably like to have 2 of those guys on your roster, right? So Jamison Crowder, I feel like, is pretty solid. Olamide Zaccheaus has been making some good plays. He's a veteran coming from Philly with Brian Johnson, the offensive pass game coordinator, with Marcus Mariota. There's a connection there. There's also a connection back in Atlanta with Dan Quinn. I think Olamide Zaccheaus is probably making this roster. By my count, that's 5 receivers. If this team keeps more than 6, I'll probably be pretty surprised. So fighting for that last potential spot, De'Ami Brown, Byron Pringle, who just came back, or is coming back, I should say, not official yet. Dax Milne, Casimir Allen, Bryson Tremaine, Marcus Rosemary, Jack Saints. And I would probably say right now, I give the edge on that to De'Ami Brown. However, I don't know that De'Ami Brown is going to be able to hold on to the spot. Byron Pringle, very effective receiver when put in the right situation. Again, we talk about offensive schemes. We talk about drawing this thing up. If Byron Pringle finds himself in a better system with this system, which he definitely could, expect Byron Pringle to make some noise. I don't think Dax Milton's making this roster. Kaz Allen, I think, is still a practice squad. Bryson Tremaine, look, if he has days like he had on Tuesday, on Thursday, Friday, moving forward, he might become a name you need to know very quickly too. But right now, I still think he's a practice squad guy. And Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint was pretty much everybody's, including my dark horse candidate to challenge for a spot on this roster at the wide receiver room. So far, very quiet training camp. Hasn't dropped a lot of passes, things like that either, but he's just been very quiet, and that's not good when you're an undrafted free agent trying to make an active roster. So probably looking at practice squad for him at best at this point. So again, something we'll keep an eye on. So we'll try to see if we can learn and confirm some new things before we have our next break update, which will probably come before the New York Jets joint training camp practice next Thursday. The practice is next Thursday, so that episode might drop on Wednesday. We'll see how it works. I got to drive to New Jersey on Wednesday as well. So we'll see what time looks like and do all those things. But either way, we're going to be back at practice on Thursday. Washington Commanders week 2, day number 2 of their training camp practice. So make sure you come back for that. In the meantime, if you have questions or comments, all you got to do is send me a text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Become a Locked On Commanders insider today. You can text me and I will text you all kinds of stuff. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to join the ever-growing group of insiders. Those of you who joined since the beginning of training camp, I appreciate every single one of you, especially those of you who I've gotten to meet at training camp. A couple of you actually signed up with me present, which was kind of a cool experience. Never done that before, but I appreciate you all as well. And of course, the insiders who've been here, I appreciate you just as much. Thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day today and every day. For your second listen, go enjoy the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. The Draft Dudes, Joe Marino and Kyle Krabs, take you inside the front office, making you a smarter NFL fan. Locked On NFL Scouting is available on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. Every dayers, thanks for coming through on a consistent basis like you do. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I will see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.